Updated the 31st of October 2017, 1940 AEDT George Papadopoulos until this week was a virtual unknown outside Washington. Key points: George Papadopoulos lied to the FBI about his campaign contacts with Russian officials. Donald Trump says at no time did his campaign team collude with Russia. Papadopoulos has entered a plea bargain with prosecutors. The 30-something political arts graduate was a mere junior advisor in Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. A bit player alongside the likes of then high-profile campaign manager Mr. Manafort. But it is the obscure former aide, rather than Mr. Manafort, who now threatens to cause the most grief for Mr. Trump. Even the news that Mr. Papadopoulos had lied to the FBI about his campaign contacts with Russian officials was at first overshadowed by the explosive charges brought against Mr. Manafort, who stands accused of money laundering and conspiracy against the U.S. As sensational as those charges are, they relate to activities that had nothing to do with the 2016 election. Mr. Trump was quick to distance himself from Mr. Manafort by tweeting, "Sorry, but this is years ago, before Paul Manafort was part of the Trump campaign. But why aren't crooked Hillary the Dems the focus also? There is no collusion." White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders agreed, saying today's announcement has nothing to do with the president. Has nothing to do with the president's campaign or campaign activity. "We've been saying, from day one, there has been no evidence of Trump or Russia collusion, and nothing in the indictment today changes that at all," she said. Both Mr. Trump and the White House have conveniently ignored the case against Mr. Papadopoulos. Already, his evidence to the FBI compromises Mr. Trump's claims that at no time did his campaign team collude with the Russian government in an attempt to sway the election result in his favor. Court documents show Mr. Papadopoulos had lied about the timing of contact between him and a Russian professor in London, who he believed to have substantial connections in the Russian government, and who claimed to be offering the Trump campaign dirt on Hillary Clinton, in the form of thousands of emails. He initially told FBI agents he had been in contact with the professor before joining the Trump campaign. But he later admitted they had met after he was employed. In one email sent in May 2016, a Trump campaign employee forwarded a message from Mr. Papadopoulos, proposing a meeting between Mr. Trump and the Russian government, to another campaign official. Washington left wondering what Papadopoulos knows. Many in Washington are now wondering how much more Mr. Papadopoulos knows, and what else he will tell prosecutors. Indeed, the Office of Special Counsel Robert Mueller is already describing Mr. Papadopoulos as a proactive cooperator. His own lawyers have indicated he has more testimony to provide. In pleading guilty, Mr. Papadopoulos entered a plea bargain with prosecutors. And that undoubtedly means an agreement to provide more information in return for a lesser sentence. It tells us that he has probably reached a deal with Robert Mueller. He pleads guilty, gets that over with. Greg Miller, a national security correspondent at The Washington Post, said, "It probably entails a great deal of cooperation and providing information on other issues. It also ignores how these investigations and prosecutions work. I think Robert Mueller is nothing if not methodical. He is going to build the most solid case he can, aiming towards the largest targets. And at the end, he's not going to reveal prematurely if he has any compelling evidence that points at Trump or points at collusion." Even the charges against Mr. Manafort, while seemingly irrelevant to the allegations of campaign collusion with Russia, could well be part of a calculated strategy by Mr. Mueller. These charges could put Manafort in jail for the rest of his life if he were convicted, Miller said. But even beyond that, there are forfeiture provisions in these charges that would attempt to make Manafort cough up these millions and millions of dollars in property that he has acquired with all of these gains over the years. This could be hugely costly for Paul Manafort. He has a great deal of incentive to cooperate. The question in Washington is, what information does he have to trade? The White House has dismissed Mr. Papadopoulos' role in the campaign as extremely limited. Ms. Sanders said any actions that he took would have been on his own.